We're talking about Dag Hammerskjold, the UN Secretary General.
Oh, an excellent choice. A truly fascinating figure.
Right. And he's one of those people who are practically synonymous with the UN, so we're on a mission here. We're going to uncover what made him tick, how he managed to navigate those Cold War tensions.
And left such an incredible legacy, yeah.
Exactly. He really is considered a giant of international diplomacy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And the thing about Hammarskjöld is he wasn't someone you'd expect to thrive on the world stage. He was a very private person.
That's what makes it so interesting. It's almost a contradiction, isn't it?
Totally. Like in one breath, he compares himself to a lost puppy dog, feeling out of place in this new environment.
The puppy dog.
You see what I mean? And then in the next, he's going toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful people on the planet.
It's kind of a head-scratcher when you think about it, because he wasn't born craving the spotlight or anything. Everything we've read paints this picture of a guy who found solace in nature, in poetry, in solitude.
Right, right. And it's important to remember his background, too, right? I mean, he wasn't just some guy who stumbled into diplomacy.
Oh, right. The whole prominent Swedish family thing.
Exactly. His upbringing, steeped in academia, public service, all that instilled a deep sense of duty in him. But it's still a paradox, isn't it?
Totally. The quiet intellectual who loved his poetry versus this, diplomatic powerhouse. How do you reconcile those two sides of him?
Million-dollar question. And it's something that puzzled people even back then. I mean, one of his teachers described him as reserved, solitary, and emotionally tense.
Wow.
Right. And that was before the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Imagine.
It's almost like those qualities, which some might see as weaknesses, were actually his strengths.
You think so?
I don't know, maybe. Because if you look at it, that devastating impersonality, as one source called it,
yeah,
maybe that allowed him to approach those really complex, high-pressure situations with a clear head.
Interesting. So instead of getting caught up in the drama, he was able to see through it.
Right. To see the bigger picture and actually find solutions.
It's a compelling theory. And, his diplomatic skills were obvious from the get-go. There's that story about him negotiating with the Russian government, even before the UN.
Oh, right. He totally impressed everyone, right. And wasn't that kind of his ticket to becoming Secretary General?
It certainly didn't hurt.
I bet that quiet competence was really disarming, particularly in those intense diplomatic situations.
Oh, absolutely. But was it calculated, you think? Or just his natural way?
That's the question, isn't it? Hard to know for sure. But I remember this one quote from his early days at the UN that might offer a clue. Something like, if a conference becomes a catch-all for every problem in the world, it will probably lead to little more than sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Wow, he said that.
Yeah.
That's pretty spot on, though, isn't it?
Right. You can almost picture him rolling his eyes at all the grandstanding.
Definitely not his style.
So even early on, substance over spectacle was his thing.
Absolutely. And, this wasn't just some naive idealism. He truly got it, The weight of words, that delicate dance of international relations, especially during the Cold War.
High stakes, for sure.
Yeah.
Which brings us to his first major test as Secretary General, the 1954 prisoner exchange with China.
Yeah, yes.
And this wasn't just some minor thing. This was a high-wire act on a global scale. So picture this. You've got 11 U.S. airmen captured during the Korean War, stuck in China.
Right.
Tensions between the U.S. and China are at a boiling point. And then Hammarskjold steps right into the middle of it.
Talk about a high-pressure situation.
It's less like diplomacy and more like, volunteering to disarm a bomb. What was he thinking?
And yet he not only volunteered, but he insisted on going to Beijing himself. I mean, this wasn't about sending messages through intermediaries. This was about face-to-face with Zhou Enlai.
Oh, man. Zhou Enlai. One of our sources described him as having a brain of steel.
Oh, he was a tough one for sure.
Yeah. And they said he had a very cordial smile and blood on his hands. So not exactly someone you want to mess with.
Not at all. But you've hit on something crucial about Hammarskjöld's approach. He understood that diplomacy, especially in those Cold War days, wasn't just about governments. It was about human connection.
So it's interesting, right? Because he himself was incredibly private, reserved, all that, yet he knew how to connect with people, build trust.
Exactly. Even with someone as formidable as Zhou Enlai.
And it worked.
It did, but not without a lot of effort. It took months, almost 5 to be precise, of really delicate negotiations. But finally, Zhou Enlai agreed to release the prisoners.
5 months. That's incredible. I can't imagine the weight on his shoulders during those 5 months. The families waiting, the world watching.
And all the while, maintaining this image of absolute neutrality.
Right. Because the second he's seen as favoring one side or the other.
It's all over.
Exactly. So, how did the release even go down? Was it just a simple handover?
Not quite. They framed it as a personal gesture, a gift to Hammerskjold in honor of his upcoming 50th birthday.
Wait, seriously?
Yep.
So on the one hand, brilliant, those airmen get to go home. But on the other hand...
It plays right into the hands of those questioning his impartiality.
Exactly. Was Zhu Enlai playing him? Using him as a pawn?
It was a clever move, no doubt.
Ah.
But Hammerskjold, ever the diplomat, immediately downplayed his own role. He wasn't going to let himself be used in their propaganda war.
He stuck to his guns, so to speak.
Exactly. Always the neutral arbiter, never picking sides.
It's like he was constantly walking this tightrope, but then it's like the tightrope turned into a razor blade.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that razor blade got even sharper with the Suez Canal crisis in 1956.
Oh, man. Talk about a trial by fire. This is where things get really messy, right? You've got Britain and France invading Egypt, the Soviet crackdown in Hungary. It's like the whole world was about to explode.
And right in the thick of it, you have Hammerskjold, trying to prevent a full-blown global conflict.
So how do you even begin to untangle that mess? What did he do?
He did something completely unprecedented. He spearheaded the creation of the UN's first-ever peacekeeping force.
Whoa. This is a big deal, right? Because before this, the UN, it was all talk, no action.
Right. No standing army, nothing. And remember, this is 1956. No internet, no instant communication.
So how did he pull it off?
Sheer willpower, it seems. He had to secure funding, personnel, equipment, all from scratch, from all over the world. While navigating the minefield of Cold War alliances, the logistics alone are mind-boggling.
It's remarkable he was able to get everyone on board. But did it actually work? Did this peacekeeping force actually do anything?
It gave them something they desperately needed: time. Having a neutral force on the ground, even a small one, it helped prevent things from spiraling even further out of control. It was a testament to his ability to get the international community to actually work together, to find some common ground in the midst of all that chaos.
I bet that didn't go over well with everyone, though, especially not a certain Soviet leader we haven't heard from in a while.
You mean Khrushchev? Yeah, he was fuming. He saw this whole UN intervention, especially Hammarskjold's role in it, as a direct threat to Soviet authority and influence.
So how did that play out?
Well, let's just say Khrushchev didn't mince words. "We will make your diplomats dance like fish in a frying pan," he declared.
Dance like fish in a frying pan. Wow, talk about adding fuel to the fire. How did Hammarskjold respond to that?
Well, he wasn't one to get rattled easily. He always kept his composure.
But I bet he was furious underneath, right? I mean, that's a pretty blatant threat.
Oh, absolutely. But he had this steely resolve. Remember that quote about his compass?
Yeah.
"My compass points neither east nor west."
Right. He wasn't going to be pushed around by anyone. East or west, it didn't matter.
Exactly. And he made that crystal clear in his response. Stood right there in front of the UN General Assembly and delivered this powerful speech.
What did he say?
He reminded everyone, very pointedly, that he served at the will of all nations, not just those who shouted the loudest or threw the biggest tantrums.
I bet that went down like a lead balloon with Khrushchev.
You can imagine. But Hammarskjold, he even offered to resign.
He did?
Yeah. He said if the majority of the UN truly felt he was no longer impartial, he would step down. No hesitation.
Wow. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Right. He was basically saying, judge me on my actions, not on Khrushchev's words.
So what happened? How did the UN respond?
They had his back, big time. They rejected Khrushchev's demands outright.
It's amazing he was able to unite them like that.
It was a defining moment, really. But, even in victory.
There's always a catch, right?
It definitely came at a price. Because, despite his efforts, this whole ordeal with Khrushchev kind of cemented this perception of him favoring the West.
I see. It's like the damage was already done, even if it wasn't really his fault.
Sadly, yeah. It was a blow to his carefully cultivated neutrality.
It must have been incredibly frustrating to pour so much of yourself into maintaining that balance only to have it constantly undermined.
It really makes you think about the impossible tightrope he was walking. How do you stay true to yourself, to your own sense of right and wrong, while still remaining completely impartial?
Right. It's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Absolutely. And that's where Hammarskjold, the man, becomes even more fascinating. Because you have this figure on the world stage dealing with these incredibly high-stakes situations.
Right. Life or death stuff.
Exactly. But at the same time, he's finding solace in poetry, in introspection.
It's a weird juxtaposition, almost like he lived a double life.
It's more like he had this inner life, this rich inner world that he drew strength from.
So what kind of poetry spoke to him? Was it like epic poems about war and peace?
Yep.
Or something else entirely?
He was drawn to works that explored solitude, the human condition, that search for meaning amidst the chaos of the world. And this wasn't just a hobby for him.
It was more than that.
It was fundamental to how he saw the world. It fed directly into his approach to everything, really, especially diplomacy.
I see. So while other leaders were busy playing chess with people's lives, he was looking for, like, a deeper understanding.
Exactly. He believed in dialogue, in finding that common ground.
A different way forward.
And that belief, that unwavering commitment to peace, is ultimately what led him to the Congo.
And to his tragic death.
Yes. That plane crash in 1961, a tragic end for someone who dedicated his life to preventing such tragedy.
Such a senseless loss. Do they know what caused the crash? Was it an accident or...?
It's still a mystery. There were investigations, of course, but nothing conclusive.
It's almost as if a part of him vanished with that plane.
In a way, yeah. He was posthumously awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, though. A testament to his enduring impact.
He definitely left his mark on the world. But it makes you wonder, would his way of doing things, all that quiet negotiation, that unwavering neutrality, would it even fly today?
Good question. It's a different world now, that's for sure.
It feels like everyone's shouting at each other, no one's listening. Diplomacy seems like a lost art.
It does make you wonder if there are lessons we can learn from Hammerskjold. About finding common ground, choosing dialogue over confrontation.
About remembering our shared humanity, even in the midst of disagreement.
Exactly.
In a world desperately searching for answers, for a way out of the storm, maybe, just maybe, we could all benefit from a little more of what he stood for.